The bus broke down at 9:12 in the morning. The engine let out one last groan before falling silent, leaving a heavy stillness enveloping the cracked asphalt road. The driver cursed, slamming his hands down on the worn, vinyl-covered steering wheel. Heat from the engine rose, carrying the acrid smell of burnt oil and aging rubber. Jack Reacher stepped out of the vehicle. He had no luggage, just the clothes he was wearing and a compact toothbrush tucked in his jacket pocket. Reacher stood on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath. The air here had the salty tang of the sea and the sourness of industrial rust. The town of Dead Rock was nestled between a sheer cliff on one side and a gray ocean growling against the concrete seawall on the other. Old fish canning factories were scattered like giant discarded rib cages. Thick fog curled around the streetlights, even though the sun was high in the sky. Reacher looked at the watch in his mind. 9:15. He needed coffee. He walked along the quiet main street. The shops were closed, their windows coated in salt dust. Only one place still had a flickering neon light, the Anchor Diner. Reacher pushed the door open. The wind chime tinkled weakly. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old beef fat and cheap floor cleaner. The diner was empty. A long bar ran along the eastern wall. The red leather seats were cracked. Reacher chose a spot at the far end of the counter, his back against the wall, his eyes surveying the entire entrance. The waitress stood behind the counter, about 25 years old. Short black-dyed hair, a bare-faced complexion revealing chronic fatigue. The name tag on her shirt read Charlie. Coffee, Reacher said. Black, hot. Charlie did not respond, only nodded slightly. She poured coffee from a glass pot into a thick white ceramic cup. Steam rose up in a swirling cloud. Reacher took the cup, his large fingers enveloping it. He brought it to his lips, scalding, strong, enough caffeine to wake an elephant. The door of the diner swung open. Cold wind rushed in, bringing with it 3 men. Reacher did not turn his head, only glanced at their reflection in the darkened window beside him. The leader wore a light brown sheriff's uniform, a shiny 6-pointed star badge pinned to his chest. He appeared to be around 40, overly groomed for a border town. His hair was slicked back with gel and his leather shoes were polished to a shine. The 2 men behind him wore deputy uniforms, their hands casually resting on their holstered guns. The atmosphere in the diner thickened. The sheriff walked straight to the bar, ignoring Reacher's presence in the corner of the room. He leaned over the wooden table, resting both hands on it, and directed his attention to the waitress. Charlie Cross, he said. His voice was smooth, carrying a nauseating insincerity. I heard you were back. Charlie did not look up. She continued to wipe an invisible stain on the counter. Her knuckles were pale. This town has no place for you, Charlie, he continued, lowering his voice to a whisper, but loud enough to echo in the silent space. 16 years have passed. Everything has been buried deep. Why dig it up? I'm just doing my job, Sheriff Blake, Charlie replied, her voice hoarse but steady. She still did not look at him. Philip Blake scoffed. He reached out, intending to touch a loose strand of hair falling over her forehead. Charlie instinctively recoiled her back, hitting the glassware shelf behind her. The sound of glass clinking rang out. Don't touch me, she hissed. Blake withdrew his hand, the smile on his face fading. He leaned over the bar, invading her personal space aggressively. You are just like your mother, Blake said, his voice icy. Stubborn, foolish. And you know how she ended up, rotting in prison. Do you want to follow that path? Charlie shot up her head. There was no fear in her eyes, only a burning hatred, a fire compressed under high pressure. You are a liar, Philip, she said, looking straight into his eyes. You and your brother. This whole damn town is built on lies. Blake slammed his hand down on the table. The sound was sharp and loud, like a gunshot. Watch your mouth, Blake growled. The 2 deputies behind him stepped forward, their hands tightening around their batons. Here I am, the law. I can throw you into the holding cell for disturbing the peace any time I want. Charlie fell silent. She knew he was telling the truth. She was all alone. Blake was pleased with the silence. He stood up straight, adjusting his collar. Pack your things, Charlie. The next bus will leave tomorrow morning. I want you on it. If not, he left the sentence hanging, letting the threat linger in the air. He turned to leave. Reacher set the porcelain cup down on the table. Clink. The sound was not loud, but in the tense atmosphere like a string about to snap it rang out clearly. Blake paused. He turned his head for the first time, truly looking into the corner of the diner. He saw a large man sitting there, a giant, occupying the entire space of the chair, broad shoulders blocking the light from the window. Reacher did not look at Blake. He was staring at the dark residue at the bottom of his coffee cup. He sat motionless. An absolute silence. Not the silence of a rock, but the silence of a cold-blooded reptile, basking in the sun, waiting for careless prey. Reacher said nothing. The silence stretched for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 7 seconds. Blake frowned. He was not used to being ignored. His power in dead rock was absolute, and the indifference of this stranger was an insult. "Who are you?" Blake asked, stepping towards Reacher. Reacher slowly lifted his head. His cold blue eyes locked onto Blake's. No blinking, no emotion. Like looking at a biological specimen under a microscope. "The coffee is finished," Reacher said. His voice was deep and resonant, like gravel grinding under a truck's wheels. Blake was taken aback. He glanced at the 2 deputy sheriffs, then turned back to Reacher, trying to find a hint of fear on the stranger's face. There was nothing. Only a terrifying calmness. "I asked who you are," Blake repeated, his hand resting on the grip of his pistol. Reacher stood up. The whole room seemed to shrink. Blake was 185 centimeters tall, but when Reacher stood straight, he looked like a child. Reacher was 196 centimeters tall and weighed 115 kilograms. He overshadowed Blake. His shadow swallowed the sheriff. Reacher looked down at Blake. He calculated the distance. 60 centimeters, a 45-degree angle. The force needed to break his wrist, 40 pounds. The force to punch through the sternum, 1,200 psi. But Reacher did not strike. Not yet. He just stood there letting his body weight and silence become weapons. He looked at the badge on Blake's chest, then into his eyes that were beginning to waver. "I am the customer waiting for a refill of coffee," Reacher said, "and you are interrupting my breakfast." Blake swallowed hard. His throat bobbed up and down. The survival instinct of a small animal was screaming, warning him of the danger before him. He wanted to draw his gun, but a part of his brain told him he would die before he could unholster it. He took a step back. An unconscious gesture, but full of meaning. "All right," Blake said, trying to keep his voice tough but failing. He pointed at Reacher's face. "You should be careful, big guy. This town doesn't like strangers." He spun around, signaling to the 2 deputy sheriffs. The 3 of them retreated to the door faster than necessary. The door closed. The sound of the patrol car's engine roared and faded away. Reacher sat back down. The tension vanished from his body as quickly as it had appeared. He pushed the empty cup towards the edge of the table. Charlie Cross was still standing behind the counter. She stared at him, her eyes wide with astonishment and suspicion. Reacher looked at her. "Coffee," he reiterated. "Not full yet." Charlie poured coffee. The stream of black liquid flowed from the spout of the glass carafe, but did not fall straight into the cup. It wobbled. A few drops splattered out, landing on the pristine white Formica counter like tiny bullet holes. Her hand was shaking. Reacher did not look at her face. He looked at the fingers tightly gripping the handle of the jar. The knuckles were pale, the blue veins bulging beneath the thin, greasy skin. A low, continuous frequency of vibration emanated from the muscles involuntarily contracting, a basic sign of excess adrenaline after a survival crisis. "You're crazy," Charlie said. Her voice no longer held the firmness it had when facing Blake. It shattered, revealing cracks of panic. She slammed the jar down onto the heat tray. The sound of glass clashing rang out sharply. Reacher raised his cup. He took a large sip. The coffee was bitter, scorching his throat, but it helped keep his mind sharp. "Maybe," Reacher replied. He placed the $10 bill on the counter, using his thumb to smooth out the crease at the corner of the bill. Charlie grabbed a cloth, scrubbing hard at the puddle of spilled coffee. She rubbed back and forth in one spot, the friction, creating a piercing squeak. She was not cleaning the table. She was trying to erase Philip Blake's presence from her mind. "He will come back," she said, her eyes still glued to the tabletop, "and next time it won't just be empty threats." "Blake never makes idle threats. He's the sheriff," Reacher remarked. "He's paid to keep order, not to harass waitstaff." Charlie stopped. She looked up at him as if he were an alien creature that had just fallen from Mars. A bitter, twisted smile creased her lips. "You're not from here. You don't understand how Dead Rock operates." "Then explain it to me," Reacher said. He sat still, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady. His silence created a low-pressure zone, drawing out confessions. Charlie threw the cloth into the sink. She leaned both hands on the counter, facing him. The distance between them was only 60 centimeters of plywood. She smelled of cheap soap and a long-standing fear that had fermented into resignation. "Blake is not just the sheriff. His family owns half this town. The canning factory, the port, the gas station. And what they don't own, they control." She lowered her voice, her eyes darting quickly to the window, even though no one was outside. 16 years ago, my father was the chief engineer at their factory. He died. The police ruled it a suicide. The one who signed the death certificate was Philip Blake's father. Reacher noted the data. 16 years. A specific number. Chief engineer. A position requiring logical thinking and precision. Men who work with concrete and steel rarely choose death by poison or rope. They usually opt for quicker and more certain methods. "What was your father's name?" Amos Cross." The name echoed in the quiet of the diner. Reacher recalled Blake's expression when he mentioned that name. Not contempt. It was wariness. "Blake said you came back," Reacher said. "Where did you go?" "An orphanage. Then a reform school. Then the military." Charlie ran her fingers through her short hair. A decisive military gesture. "I just got out 3 weeks ago, came back here to sell the old house. That's all I want. Sell the house, get the money, and get out of this hellhole for good. But Blake doesn't want you to stay even for a day." "He's scared." Reacher nodded slightly. That was the conclusion he had drawn 10 minutes earlier. "Why?" he asked. "A guy with a gun, a badge power. Why be afraid of a 25-year-old girl with nothing but a rundown house?" Charlie fell silent. She looked out the window where the fog was beginning to swallow the asphalt road. "Because I am like my mother," she said, her voice dwindling to a whisper. "My mother didn't believe my father committed suicide." She started asking questions. She wrote letters to newspapers, to the governor. A month later, she was arrested for drug possession. A large amount of heroin was found in her car. She died in prison 2 years later. Pneumonia, they said. Reacher gently swirled the coffee in his cup. 2 deaths, a perfect picture of suppression. But perfection often comes with artificiality. In nature, everything is messy. Only humans try to arrange everything into straight lines. "Do you think Blake is involved?" That was not a question. "I don't think." "I know." Charlie clenched her fists. "Before she was arrested, my mother hid something. She said it was insurance. She didn't have time to tell me where it was, but Blake believes I know. Or he is afraid I will find it." Reacher checked the time in his head. 9:45. The broken-down bus outside lay still like a giant metal corpse. No mechanics had shown up. No tow truck. He is stuck. According to common logic, this is the time he should stand up, walk out to the highway, and hitch a ride to another state. The troubles of Dead Rock are the troubles of Dead Rock. He is a ghost, a passing traveler. He owes no one anything, but Reacher hates bullies. And he particularly hates bullies who hide behind a police badge. He looks at Charlie Cross. This girl has a strong facial structure, the eyes of someone who has seen too much wickedness but refuses to shut them. She reminds him of the soldiers he once commanded. Those who never ran away, even when the order to retreat had been given. "The bus is broken," Reacher said. He changed the subject abruptly. Charlie blinked, taking a few seconds to catch up with his train of thought. "What? The bus? A piston is broken, or the camshaft is stuck. It won't run today. So what? So I need a place to sleep. And a lunch." Charlie stared at him. She was trying to decode the giant in front of her. He had just heard a story about corruption, murder, and threats, but his only reaction was to ask about a place to sleep. "There is an inn at the end of the road," she said slowly, cautiously, "but Blake will know as soon as you check in. The innkeeper is his wife's cousin." "I don't care about his relatives," Reacher said. He drained the remaining coffee, ice cold. "I only care if the mattress has bed bugs." "Why are you doing this?" Charlie asked. This time she looked him straight in the eye, searching for a hidden motive. "You could walk out to the highway. You could leave. Why poke the hornet's nest?" Reacher stood up. The cushioned chair squeaked as he freed himself from its weight. He adjusted his coat collar, feeling the roughness of the canvas rub against the skin of his neck. "Because I don't like my coffee being interrupted," he said. That was half the truth. The other half he kept to himself. He didn't like the way her hands trembled. He didn't like the way Blake walked as if he owned the ground beneath his feet. And above all, he was curious about the so-called suicide of a chief engineer 16 years ago. Reacher stepped out the door. Before pushing the heavy glass door, he turned back. "My name is Jack Reacher," he said. "If Blake comes back, tell him I'm at the inn." "Why?" Charlie asked after him. "So he knows where to find me," Reacher replied. The door closed behind him. The wind chimes tinkled once again, sounding like the ticking of a timer. Reacher stepped into the thick fog. The air outside was colder than before. The wind had shifted, blowing in from the sea, carrying the scent of storms and things decaying at the bottom of the deep abyss. He turned left, heading toward the end of town. His footsteps were steady, each stride exactly 1 meter long. He was not in a hurry. He had 24 hours, or perhaps longer, and he had just begun. The fog in Dead Rock was unlike ordinary fog. It was heavier, stickier. It clung to the skin like a layer of cold diesel oil. Reacher pulled up his coat collar, walking along the gravel-strewn sidewalk. He walked north. By his calculations, the inn was 800 meters from the diner, a 10-minute walk at a leisurely pace. The sea breeze whipped by bringing the salty tang, and the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs like a hammer pounding on concrete. A black Ford sedan was creeping up behind him. Reacher did not turn his head. He heard the tires grinding on the wet pavement. The engine groaned in a low gear. An old car, the exhaust, had a small hole that created a characteristic puttering sound every 3 seconds. It had been following him since he left the Anchor Diner. Reacher maintained his speed. He did not change his pace, did not appear hurried or alert. He maintained the stillness of a rock rolling down a hill. Nothing could disturb him unless he allowed it. The car accelerated slightly past him, then pulled over to the curb about 50 meters ahead. The passenger side window rolled down. Reacher walked on. He did not stop. He glided past the car as if it were invisible. "Hey!" The call was abrupt, a man's voice hoarse from cigarettes. Reacher halted. He turned a perfect vertical pivot, slow yet energy efficient. The driver was a guy around 50, gaunt. His face was hollow with deep-set, dark-circled eyes. He wore an old frayed sweater at the elbows. His hands rested on the steering wheel, trembling slightly. Not the kind of tremor of Charlie Cross. This was the tremor of a drug addict, in withdrawal, or someone in extreme fear. "Don't go to the inn," the man said. He did not look at Reacher, his eyes darting continuously through the rearview mirror. "Why?" Reacher asked. "No rooms left. It's the off-season. This town is dead. There can't be no rooms." The man swallowed hard. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles cracked. "Listen, stranger," Blake called. He called everyone. "No one is allowed to rent you a room. No one is allowed to sell you food. You are under embargo." Reacher looked at him. He analyzed the data. This guy was not Blake's soldier. He did not have the arrogance of a ruler. He was a victim, a rat trying to warn a stray cat about the trap. "Who are you?" "Not important," the man replied quickly. "I just don't want to see more corpses wash up at Black Rock. Go back to the bus station. Sit there until tomorrow morning. Don't cause trouble." "It's too late," Reacher said. The man looked at him for the first time. In his eyes was raw desperation. "You don't understand. They don't just have guns. They have something else." "What's something else?" The man did not answer. He saw something in the rearview mirror. His face drained of color. He hit the gas. The Ford lunged forward, the tires spinning wildly on the muddy ground before gripping the road and speeding away, leaving behind a cloud of acrid black smoke. Reacher watched the car until it disappeared into the mist. Something else. He noted that phrase into his short-term memory. He turned and continued walking. 5 minutes later, the sign for the inn appeared. Cliffside Motel. The word motel had 2 burnt-out bulbs, leaving only Mo-El, an apt name. The 2-story L-shaped building teetered right on the edge of the cliff, its peeling paint revealing the grim gray bricks underneath. Reacher pushed open the office door. The bell rang out sharply. Inside, the stale smell of old cigarettes and the mustiness of cheap carpet that had never been cleaned filled the air. The manager sat behind the reception desk, a fat guy, bald, wearing a tank top covered in cookie crumbs. He was watching a quiz show on a tiny black and white television. He looked up as Reacher entered. His gaze shifted from indifferent to alert immediately. The telephone sat right next to him. "We're out of rooms," he said immediately before Reacher could speak. Reacher did not reply. He stepped up to the counter, placing both hands on the glass surface. He was a head and a half taller than the manager. He dominated the space of this small room, sucking all the oxygen out of it. Reacher looked at the key rack hanging behind the man. 20 hooks, 18 keys were sitting there. 18 vacant rooms, Reacher said. "They are reserved," the manager stammered. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. "A tour group. They are on their way." "In Dead Rock." "At this time of year?" Reacher asked. His voice was flat. "Don't lie, you're terrible at that." The manager stepped back, his hand fumbling for the phone. "Blake told me not to rent a room to you," Reacher said. "That was a statement. I don't know what you're talking about." Reacher reached out, quick as a striking cobra. He grabbed the manager's wrist before he could touch the receiver. He didn't squeeze hard, just enough to hold him still. "I need a room, 2nd floor, ocean view, double bed, and I will pay in cash." The manager looked at the large hand gripping his wrist. He felt the latent strength within it. The power of a hydraulic press waiting to be unleashed. "You're causing me trouble," the manager whined. "I am the only trouble you need to worry about right now," Reacher said. "Blake isn't here, I am." The manager swallowed hard. He nodded, a painful nod. Reacher released his grip. The manager reached for the key to room 204. $40, he whispered. Reacher placed 2 $20 bills on the counter. He took the key. "Don't call Blake," Reacher said. "Not yet." He turned and walked up the rusty iron stairs outside. The steps creaked under his weight. Room 204 was at the far end of the 2nd floor hallway. Reacher opened the door. The room was cold. A sagging bed, a pressed wood table, and a large window facing the ocean. He didn't check the bed. He walked straight to the window. The fog was lifting under the influence of the sea breeze. The view opened up. From this position, he could see the entire northern coastline of the town. The frothy waves crashed against the sheer cliffs, and there, jutting out on the highest rock, was a grim gray concrete structure. Reacher squinted. It was an old military bunker, a battery, a coastal artillery observation station from World War II. 1/2 meter thick reinforced concrete, narrow embrasures facing the sea. A relic of the past, abandoned to the ravages of salt water. But something was wrong. Reacher rummaged through his memory. Where had Charlie Cross said her father died? The old observation station. Suicide. Reacher pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He scrutinized the structure of the bunker. It was the standard Type 4 design of the United States Army Corps of Engineers. He knew it well, every centimeter. He had destroyed them, and he had also built them. The entrance to the bunker was on the landward side, a heavy steel door. Charlie said the police concluded her father committed suicide inside the door, locked from the inside. A classic locked room case. Reacher frowned. The steel door of the Type 4 bunker had no locking mechanism on the inside. It was designed to withstand fire from the sea, not to keep people inside. The only locking mechanism was on the outside, a forged steel bolt to seal the ammunition storage when not in use. If Amos Cross died inside with the door locked, then someone had locked him in. It couldn't have been suicide. That is physics. That is mechanics. That is an absolute truth that cannot be denied. Reacher stepped back from the window. A jolt of electricity ran down his spine. It was not fear. It was the thrill of the hunter catching the scent of fresh blood. 16 years of lies, built on a technical detail that no one in this fishing town noticed or dared to speak up about. Reacher looked at the clock in his head. 10:15. He was not leaving anymore. Not today. There were soft footsteps in the hallway outside. Too soft for the fat manager. Too stealthy for a housekeeper. Reacher moved. He made no noise. He stepped beside the door, his back against the wall, his hands relaxed but ready. The footsteps stopped right in front of room 204. A silence stretched for 3 seconds. Then, a white envelope was gently pushed through the crack under the door. Reacher waited. He heard the footsteps retreating faster. Then the iron stairs rattled. He sat down, picked up the envelope. It was not sealed. Inside was an old Polaroid photo, its colors faded to yellow. The photo showed 3 men standing in front of that bunker. One was Amos Cross, based on the resemblance to Charlie. The second was a young Philip Blake, wearing a deputy sheriff's uniform. The third man made Reacher squint. The third man wore a white lab coat, holding a metal briefcase marked with a biohazard symbol. But what was notable was not the attire. What was notable was that he was smiling, and half of his face was disfigured by a lumpy burn scar stretching from his temple down to his chin, making that smile look like a devil's crack. The back of the photo had a hasty note written in oil pencil, "Ask Meredith about the box." Reacher tucked the photo into his breast pocket. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The hallway was empty. Only the sea wind howled through the rusty bars. The game had changed. He was no longer a passerby, waiting for a car repair. He was the only one in this damn town who knew how to open a Type 4 bunker door. Reacher folded the photo into quarters. The creases were sharp. He stuffed it into the left side of his shirt pocket, right against the thick canvas of his coat. He left room 204. The iron stairs creaked under the weight of 115 pounds. Reacher stepped down to the street. The wind had picked up. It blew in from the ocean, carrying the sharp taste of salt and fine sand. The sand stuck to his face, crunching between his teeth. Reacher walked into the wind. He headed towards the anchor. Dead rock was laid out in a simple grid pattern. 3 main streets ran parallel to the coast, intersected by 12 narrow alleys. The houses were low, with slanted roofs and gray lead-colored wooden siding. There were no trees, nothing to block the wind except the concrete walls of the distant canning factory. He pushed open the diner door. The wind chime jingled. The same sound, the same smell of old beef grease. Charlie Cross was standing behind the counter. She was no longer wiping the tables. She was counting change. The coins clinked as they fell into the plastic tray. She looked up as the cold air rushed into the room. Her shoulders stiffened. Reacher walked over to the old chair in the corner, a strategic position, his back against the wall, facing the door with a view spanning 180 degrees. "I thought you found a place to sleep," Charlie said. She did not look at him, her hands continuing to stack the coins. 5 cents in a pile. "I did," Reacher replied. "Now I need information." He pulled the Polaroid photo out of his pocket. He placed it on the Formica counter, gently pushing it towards her with 2 fingers. The photo slid across, stopping right next to the pile of coins. Charlie looked down. Her breath caught. An immediate physical reaction. Her pupils dilated, swallowing the brown of her irises. Blood drained from her face, leaving her skin pale like wax. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Someone sent it to me," Reacher said. He observed her. He did not rush her. He sat still, both hands resting calmly on the table, breathing steadily at 12 beats per minute. The absolute silence of a large reptile lying in ambush by the water's edge, waiting for an unsuspecting prey to step forward. His silence had its own weight, pressing down on the cramped space of the diner. Charlie picked up the photo. Her hand trembled more violently than in the morning. She stared at the man on the left. The one with the angular jawline just like hers. Dad, she whispered. Her thumb lightly brushed over the image of that man as if trying to wipe away the dust of time. The one on the right, Reacher said, the guy with the scar. Charlie flinched as if electrocuted. She dropped the photo onto the table. Meredith, she said. Meredith Blake, the brother of the sheriff. Yes, what does he do? Charlie looked out the window, scanning the empty road. The habit of a hunted animal. He is a doctor. Or he used to be. 16 years ago, he ran a botany lab on the outskirts of town, researching types of seaweed and natural toxins. And now he is a ghost. Charlie turned back, facing Reacher. In her eyes was raw terror. He lives in the Black Forest behind the old canning factory. No one dares to go near there. They say he went mad after the lab accident. The scar, acid, Charlie replied, or fire. No one knows for sure. It happened the same week my father died. Reacher noted the details. The same week. In his world there were no coincidences. Two catastrophic events occurring within the same narrow time frame always had a common root cause. The metal box. Reacher pointed to the object in Meredith's hand in the photo. The briefcase with the bright orange biohazard symbol, even though the photo had faded. What was he holding? Charlie shook her head. I don't know. My mother never talked about it. She mentioned a type of insurance. Reacher recalled her words from the morning. Something that scared Blake. Do you think that box is the insurance? I think it's the cause, Reacher said. Meredith Blake held the box. Amos Cross died in a locked bunker. Philip Blake became the sheriff and sealed off the town. A three-variable equation. Charlie leaned her hands on the table. She leaned forward, lowering her voice even further. You don't understand, Reacher. Meredith is not just a madman. He is a monster. Those who enter that forest never come back. Or if they do, they are no longer themselves. Example, the old man drives a black Ford, Charlie said quickly. He used to be the best hunter in the area. 3 years ago he went into the woods to find a lost dog. 2 days later he crawled out, hair white as snow, rambling about walking trees and the smell of death. Reacher nodded. The Ford driver. The one who had given the warning. What is his name? Giles. He lives at the junkyard to the south. The door to the bar swung open. Reacher did not turn around. He heard footsteps, heavy. The hard rubber soles thudding against the tiled floor. 3 men. Charlie stepped back, her back hitting the shelf of glasses. Her face drained of color. Reacher turned in his seat. Slowly, 3 men entered. They were not wearing police uniforms. They wore faded jeans, denim jackets, and steel-toed boots. Laborers, or cheap mercenaries. The lead man was large, with a shaved head and a tattoo of a black centipede on his neck. He held an aluminum baseball bat. The 2 men behind him carried chains and a length of pipe. The bar is closed, the bald man said. He looked at Charlie, then shifted his gaze to Reacher. A contemptuous, evaluative look. He saw a big guy sitting drinking coffee, not a threat, a fundamental mistake. You are the tourist, the bald man said rhythmically, slapping the bat against his left palm. Whack, whack, whack. The sheriff sends his regards. Reacher remained seated. He looked at the bat. Hollow aluminum. Light, quick to swing, but less damaging than solid oak. I am talking to you, the bald man growled, stepping closer. The smell of sour beer and cheap cigarettes wafted from him. Reacher exhaled softly. He calculated 3 opponents, 3 meters apart. Close-range weapons, no guns. You should leave, Reacher said. His voice was calm, non-threatening, not pleading. Just an objective piece of advice based on the disparity in combat capability. The bald man laughed loudly. He turned to his 2 lackeys. Did you hear what he said? He told me to leave. He turned back, raising the bat high. A threatening strike aimed at the table. Reacher stood up. His movement was smooth and explosive. No momentum. No warning signs. From a state of rest to maximum kinetic energy in 0.2 seconds, the bald man had not yet lowered the bat. Reacher stepped forward, penetrating the inner arc of the swing. His left hand swept the bat-wielding arm aside. His right hand, a fist as large as a rock, drove straight into the bald man's throat. Crack! The sound of crushed trachea echoed sharply. The bald man dropped the bat. He clutched his throat, eyes bulging, mouth agape, but making no sound other than the whistling of air trying to escape through the crushed trachea. He collapsed to the floor, convulsing. The two men behind were stunned. Their brains had not processed the image of their leader falling in a second. Reacher did not stop. He kicked the aluminum bat towards the man with the chain. The bat spun through the air, striking his shins. He yelled, doubling over. Reacher charged forward. He grabbed the hair of the man with the pipe, yanking his head down while kneeing him. His knee collided with the man's face. The sound of shattered nasal bones mixed with the sound of broken teeth. The man fell backward unconscious the moment his back hit the ground. The man with the iron chain was trying to get up his hand, fumbling to pull out a folding knife from his pocket. Reacher stepped forward. He stomped down hard on his wrist. The force of 115 pounds combined with gravitational acceleration. The wrist bone shattered. The knife flew far away. Reacher bent down. He looked into the eyes of the only one still conscious but moaning in pain. "Tell Blake," Reacher said, his voice still steady as when he ordered coffee. "Next time send someone more professional." He stood up straight, adjusting his collar. His breathing remained unchanged in rhythm. Charlie Cross stood frozen behind the counter. She looked at the three men sprawled on the floor. Blood began to spread across the white tiles. Then she looked up at Reacher. In her eyes there was no longer doubt. It was fear mixed with awe. She had just witnessed a storm passing through the form of a man. Reacher turned back, picked up the Polaroid photo, and tucked it into his pocket. "The Southern Junkyard," he confirmed. "Giles." Charlie nodded, a mechanical unconscious motion. Reacher stepped over the body of the bald man, gasping for breath, and pushed the door open to step outside. The wind was still blowing, the fog was still thick, but the chessboard had changed pieces. Reacher had made the first move, and now he would go in search of the pawn named Giles. The Southern Junkyard was 2 miles from the anchor. Reacher walked. The sea breeze hit his right side. The asphalt road gradually turned into packed earth mixed with gravel and shards of broken glass. The air was thick with the smell of burnt engine oil and iron oxide. This area was the graveyard of machines. Thousands of car carcasses piled up into 3-story rusted towers leaning precariously, a labyrinth of dead metal. Reacher stopped in front of the main gate. The B-40 steel mesh gate had collapsed halfway, tightly entwined with thorny vines. A no-entry sign was riddled with bullet holes. The red paint faded to the color of dried blood. He did not go through the gate. It was a tactical blind spot. He walked along the fence eastward for 50 meters. The wire mesh here was cut, the sharp edge facing outward. Reacher leaned over, slipping through the gap. His canvas jacket brushed against the metal, producing a faint squeak. Inside was silent. No birds chirping, no insects buzzing. Only the sound of the wind whistling through the hollow frames of cars, creating mournful howls. Reacher observed the ground. The tire tracks of a Ford were still fresh. The mud had not yet completely dried at the edge of the tire groove. A small oil stain dripped, leading deep into the center of the junkyard. He followed the trail. His footsteps landed on the soft ground with control. His body weight was evenly distributed from heel to toe, muffling the sound. He moved like a giant shadow among the car wrecks. In the center of the maze was an open space. A makeshift hut made of corrugated iron, and an old truck door stood alone. A chimney rose from the roof, releasing thin plumes of black smoke. The black Ford was parked at an angle beside it, the driver's door wide open. Reacher stood behind a pile of Chevrolet wrecks. He checked the time in his head. 11 hours and 12 minutes. He stepped out from his hiding place. He did not sneak. He walked straight toward the hut's door. The crunch of gravel under his shoes echoed clearly in the stillness. It was an announcement, a calculated provocation. "Stop!" The voice came from inside, fragmented and panicked. A gun barrel protruded through the window gap of the hut. A short-barreled, double-barreled shotgun. A street weapon with a widespread, high damage at close range. Reacher did not stop. He slowed down but still moved forward. "I will shoot, I swear, I will shoot," Giles shouted. His voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. Reacher looked into the dark muzzle of the gun. He calculated. The distance was 10 meters. A short-barreled gun, high recoil. The person holding the gun was trembling. The probability of hitting a large target like him was 90%. The probability of hitting a vital spot, 50-50. He stopped 5 meters from the door. "You should engage the safety, Giles," Reacher said. His voice was deep, resonant, overpowering the sound of the wind. "Your finger is shaking. The sawed-off shotgun has no trigger guard. You will shoot yourself in the leg before you can aim at me." Silence enveloped them for 3 seconds. The metal door swung open. Giles stepped out. He looked worse than in the morning. His eyes were bloodshot, the whites streaked with tiny blood vessels. Sweat dripped down his face, caked with soot. His hands gripped the gun tightly, but the muzzle wobbled up and down with the erratic beating of his heart. He looked at Reacher. He had to tilt his head back to see his face. Reacher stood there, his hands relaxed at his sides. He was not in a defensive stance. He did not appear threatening. He simply existed. A solid mass of 115 kilograms, imposing, unyielding, unnegotiable. It was this calmness that frightened Giles more than any threat. Faced with a fury, one could flee or fight back, but facing a glacier, one could only feel their own smallness and helplessness. "What do you want?" Giles whimpered. He took a step back, tripping over an old tire. He nearly fell, but still aimed the gun at Reacher. "Information," Reacher replied. "I don't know anything. I told you to leave. Why don't you go?" "Meredith Blake," Reacher said that name. Giles recoiled. The gun in his hand lowered at a 15-degree angle. The name impacted him physically like a punch to the stomach. "Don't," Giles whispered. He looked around as if Meredith could materialize from the scrap metal. "Don't say his name. He can hear it. His ears are everywhere." Reacher took a step forward. Giles jumped, raising the gun. His finger was on the trigger. Reacher did not blink. He stared directly into Giles's continuously constricting pupils. "If you were going to shoot, you would have done it already," Reacher said. "But you haven't shot, because you know shooting me will make noise, and the noise will attract the sheriff. You fear Blake more than you fear me." Giles lowered the gun. He surrendered. His shoulders slumped, all resistance drained away. He plopped down onto the tattered car seat placed in front of the tent. "They are monsters," Giles said, his voice choked. He pulled a crumpled pack of cigarettes from his jacket pocket, trying to pull one out, but his shaking hands caused the entire pack to fall to the ground. Reacher picked up the pack of cigarettes. He took one out and handed it to Giles. Then he took the Zippo lighter from his pocket and flicked it open. The blue flame danced in the wind. Giles took a long drag. The gray smoke calmed his trembling. 3 years ago, Giles began, his eyes fixed on the toe of Reacher's shoe. "I went into the woods, the black forest behind the factory. My hunting dog got lost in there." "What did you find?" "I found hell." Giles laughed, a twisted smile missing 2 front teeth. "The trees there. They were wrong. The leaves were purple. The trunks oozed black sap like tar. And the smell of that smell." "What smell?" "The smell of bitter almonds," Giles said. "And the smell of rotting flesh." Reacher recorded the data. Bitter almonds, signs of cyanide or nitrogen-based compounds, altered plants, black resin. "I saw Meredith's old campsite," Giles continued. His voice grew softer, as if he were confessing. "There were guards. Not police. Soldiers in black with submachine guns. I hid behind the bushes. I saw them carrying barrels to the riverbank. They poured something into the water. The water boiled. Fish floated belly up immediately." "You said you were caught," Reacher reminded. Giles shuddered. The cigarette in his mouth fell to the ground. "I was discovered. They dragged me into the tent. Meredith was there." Giles raised his hand to touch his face, as if to check if his flesh was still intact. He wore a gas mask. "But I saw his eyes through the lenses. His eyes had no whites. Pure black." "What did he do to you?" "He injected me," Giles said. He rolled up his sweater sleeve. On his skinny arm were many raised scars and bruised needle marks. He said I was the perfect host. He called it Project Pigbird. He wanted to see how long a person could endure before their brain melted. Did he let you go? He didn't let me go. He tossed me out into the edge of the forest. Like trash. He thought I would die. I crawled back here. I've been hiding here for 3 years. I haven't dared to go outside. Philip Blake knows I'm still alive. He let me live as a warning, to remind others never to set foot in that forest. The box reacher asked in the photo. What box was Meredith holding? Giles looked up. The fear in his eyes solidified into a tangible mass. It's the seeds, Giles whispered, not plant seeds. Seeds of death. Meredith brought it back from abroad 16 years ago. He said it would change the world. But it only brings death. It needs blood to germinate. Where is the forest? Giles pointed northwest, where the smokestacks of the canning factory rose up to pierce the fog. Don't go there, Giles pleaded. He grabbed the hem of Reacher's pants. You're big, you're strong, but you're still human. The things in that forest, they are no longer human. Reacher pulled Giles's hand away, gently but firmly. Thanks for the cigarette, Reacher said. He turned away. They will kill you, Giles shouted after him. They will skin you and hang you from a tree. Reacher did not stop. He walked out of the scrap maze. The information was sufficient. An illegal chemical laboratory, nerve agents, or biological weapons, protected by the sheriff. And Meredith Blake, the scar-faced mad pharmacist, was running it all. Amos Cross discovered this 16 years ago, and he was locked in a bunker to cover it up. Charlie Cross was the only variable they hadn't accounted for. Reacher looked towards the factory smokestacks. Giles was right about one thing. They needed blood to germinate. Reacher clenched his fists. The knuckles cracked. He would give them blood. A lot of blood. But not his own. 12 hours, 14 minutes past noon. The sun hung overhead, but there was no warmth. It was just a pale white disk shining down on the town of Dead Rock through the lingering fog. Reacher walked along the only road leading from the scrapyard to the center. The sea breeze blew against him. The canvas jacket flapped against his legs in a steady rhythm. Every 3 steps a gust slapped his face, bringing with it coal, dust, and the salty tang of the ocean. A black and white Dodge Charger patrol car appeared around the bend ahead. It did not sound its siren. Only the revolving lights on the roof spun, blue and red. The artificial streaks of color cut through the dreary, gray monotony of the scenery. Reacher did not slow down. He did not veer to the side. He continued down the center of the road. The car rushed forward, braking sharply 10 meters away from him. The front of the car dipped, the rubber tires skidding on the wet pavement, creating a piercing screech. The driver's side door swung open. A deputy sheriff stepped out. He was large. About 1.90 meters tall, weighing at least 100 kilograms. Broad shoulders, a potbelly pressing against a bulky leather belt laden with weapons and handcuffs. The nameplate on his chest read, Hatcher. Hatcher drew his gun. A Glock 17. Stop, Hatcher shouted. Get down. Hands behind your head, Reacher halted. He did not kneel. He stood straight, his hands relaxed at his sides. He looked at Hatcher from a distance of 10 meters. The deputy sheriff held the gun with both hands, legs spread wide in a standard combat stance. But his weight was too far forward. He was trying to appear intimidating, an effort to compensate for the insecurity within. Reacher observed Hatcher. He did not look at the gun. He looked into the man's eyes. Hatcher was sweating. Although the outdoor temperature was only about 12 degrees Celsius, beads of sweat still formed on his forehead, trickling into his eyes, causing a stinging sensation. He blinked continuously. He looked at Reacher, and he saw a wall. Hatcher was used to bullying drunks, exhausted fishermen, or the wayward youths in town. He was accustomed to seeing fear in the eyes of those facing him when the dark muzzle of a gun was pointed at their faces. Fear was his measure of power. But Reacher was not afraid. Reacher stood there, completely motionless. Not the kind of stillness of someone paralyzed by terror. It was the calm of an ancient, cold-blooded reptile. A crocodile floating on murky water, its emotionless yellow eyes, observing the prey struggling futilely on the shore. Hatcher felt his throat dry. The Glock in his hand suddenly felt weightless, useless, like a plastic toy before this flesh and blood giant. He sensed the pressure radiating from Reacher, a distinct gravity compressing the air around him, draining his oxygen. "I told you to get down," Hatcher yelled, his voice cracking at a high pitch. He took 2 steps forward, closing the distance. "A basic tactical mistake." "You are making a mistake," Hatcher Reacher said. His voice was deep calm, like a diesel engine idling. "You are trembling. Your finger is on the trigger. You will miss your first shot, and you will not have a chance for a second." Hatcher froze. He looked down at his hand. It was shaking violently. He tried to grip the gun tightly, but his muscles would not obey. Fear crept into his spine, cold and piercing. He realized he was facing something far beyond the level of barroom violence he had known. He was facing a killing machine that had turned off its safety switch. "You broke Ray's neck," Hatcher said, trying to regain his composure by recalling his opponent's crime. "Blake wants you, alive or dead." "Blake is wrong," Reacher said. "He should want me to leave here, but now it is too late." Hatcher gritted his teeth. He felt humiliated by Reacher's calmness. He was the law. He had a gun. He was supposed to be the one in control. "I will blow your head off," Hatcher growled, taking another step closer. The distance was now 3 meters. Reacher exhaled. In his mind, the countdown began. Hatcher adjusted his aim. He squinted his right eye. The muscles in his index finger began to contract. Reacher moved. No one so large could move so quickly. It violated the laws of physics regarding inertia and mass. Reacher did not rush forward. He exploded. He turned to the left, pulling his chest out of the line of fire. His right hand swung up a slap with the back of his hand, as fast as a whip crack. Thud. The Glock flew out of Hatcher's hand, spinning through the air before falling into the drainage ditch by the road. Hatcher stood stunned. He looked at his empty hand. His brain had not yet processed the event that had just occurred. Reacher grabbed Hatcher by the collar. He yanked hard. 100 kilograms of the deputy sheriff was lifted off the ground like an empty sack. Reacher slammed him against the side of the Dodge Charger. Bang! The window glass by the driver's seat rattled violently. Reacher leaned his face close to Hatcher's, a distance of 10 centimeters. Hatcher could smell the black coffee and cheap cigarette smoke on Reacher's breath. But what was more terrifying were those cold blue eyes. They contained no anger. They contained no hatred. They were empty. An empty cruelty of the vast universe. Hatcher wet himself. He lost control. His bladder sphincter gave way before the primal terror. A warm stream flowed down his thigh, soaking his khaki uniform pants. "Tell Blake," Reacher whispered. The sound echoed directly into Hatcher's skull. "Next time, don't send soldiers. Come yourself." "Reacher, let go." Hatcher slid down along the side of the car, sitting down on the ground. He gasped for breath, his chest heaving like a fish out of water. He looked up at Reacher, his eyes wide and watery. He saw a mountain blocking the sun. He saw death patiently waiting. The passenger side door of the patrol car remained tightly closed. A young deputy sheriff sat inside, gripping the radio tightly but too scared to call. His face was pale, pressed against the window glass. He had locked the door latch. He chose to be a spectator rather than a victim, a smart choice. Reacher bent down, picking up the Glock 17. He removed the magazine. 17 rounds. He chambered 1 round, aimed the gun at the ground and pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet shattered the asphalt 5 centimeters from Hatcher's feet. The deputy sheriff screamed, curling up, covering his head. Reacher disassembled the slide of the gun. He threw the frame into the bushes on the left side of the road. He tossed the slide and barreled towards the sea on the right. The recoil spring flew out behind him. "Walk back," Reacher said to Hatcher. "It'll be good for your heart." He turned his back, continuing towards the town. The wind still blew. Reacher adjusted his collar. He did not look back. He did not need to check if Hatcher was getting up. He knew Hatcher had been shattered. Not his bones, but his will. That big deputy sheriff would never dare to point a gun at another man for the rest of his life. Reacher looked at the clock in his head. 12:25. His stomach growled. He needed food, protein, carbohydrates. But first he needed to check on Charlie Cross. Blake had escalated. He had sent the police. He had crossed the line of verbal threats. Reacher quickened his pace. His old leather shoes thudded steadily on the pavement. 1, 2, 3, 4. The town of Dead Rock appeared before him, shrouded in a gray fog. It looked peaceful, artificial, like a grave just filled with dirt. The sheriff's office was on the second floor of the town hall. The reinforced glass window overlooked the main street. From here, Philip Blake could observe his tiny kingdom. Blake stood by the window. He lit a cigar. The blue smoke hovered in the air, which was air-conditioned to 20 degrees Celsius. He looked down at the street. The fog is lifting. He waits for the Dodge Charger to return. He waits to see the hulking drifter in handcuffs dragged out from the back seat, his face bruised. It is standard procedure, a ritual of power he has performed hundreds of times over the past 16 years. 12:45. The office door opens. There is no knock. Blake turns around frowning. The unannounced intrusion irritates him. Hatcher steps in. The deputy sheriff walks in like a sleepwalker. His steps are heavy, dragging on the glossy tiled floor. He is not wearing a hat. His hair is matted with sweat, and his pants right at the crotch are darkened with urine that has begun to dry. Blake looks down at the holster on Hatcher's hip. Empty. "Where is he?" Blake asks. His voice is cold, sharp as a scalpel. Hatcher does not answer immediately. He walks over to the suspect's chair and plops down. The oak chair creaks under his weight. He stares at the blank wall behind Blake. His pupils are dilated. "I'm asking you," Blake steps to the desk, snuffing out his cigar in the crystal ashtray. "Where is that drifter, and where is your gun?" "He took it," Hatcher whispers. "What, he took my gun?" "Like taking candy from a child." Blake scoffs, a smile that does not reach his eyes. "Are you kidding me, Hatcher? You weigh 100 kilograms. You've been the arm wrestling champion of this county for 3 years straight. A homeless guy took your gun." Hatcher looks up. For the first time, he meets Blake's gaze. In the deputy's eyes, there is no shame, no remorse, only primal terror. A deep-seated fear gnawing to the bone, the kind of fear a person feels only when faced with a natural disaster or a wild beast. "He's not homeless," Boss Hatcher says. His voice trembles, breaking. "He's something else. He's just a big guy, that's it." "No," Hatcher shakes his head vigorously. "You haven't seen him. You're not standing in front of him. He doesn't move." Blake furrows his brow. "What nonsense are you talking about?" "He stood there," Hatcher continues, breathless. He raises his hands, illustrating the invisible space. "I aimed my gun at his face. 10 meters. Anyone would be scared. Anyone would beg or run. But he didn't. His heartbeat didn't change. He looked at me as if I didn't exist, as if the gun in my hand was just a banana." Hatcher swallows hard. His throat moves up and down laboriously. Then he moved. "I swear to God, boss, I didn't see him start. I only saw the result. 1 second he was far away. The next second he was right in front of me. The gun flew away, and I was lifted up." Blake is silent. He has known Hatcher for 10 years. Hatcher is a brute stupid, but he does not lie, and Hatcher is not the kind of person easily frightened. "He broke my will." Boss Hatcher lowers his head, looking at his trembling hands resting on his knees. "He shot right next to my leg. He didn't need to look. He disassembled the Glock in 3 seconds and threw it into the sea. He did all of that with the expression of someone taking out the trash." Blake walks around the desk. He opens a drawer, pulls out a bottle of whiskey and a glass. He fills the glass and pushes it towards Hatcher. The deputy sheriff takes the glass with both hands, downs it in one go. The strong liquor makes him cough, but it helps him regain some color in his face. "Did he say anything?" Blake asked. "He said next time not to send soldiers. Come yourself." Blake tightened his grip on the edge of the table. The rigid oak pressed into his palm. Reacher. That name now carried a different weight. At first Blake thought of him as just a meddlesome drifter, a minor annoyance. But now, through Hatcher's account, the image of the enemy became clearer. Close combat disarming skills, psychological warfare, knowledge of firearms, and inhuman calmness. This was not a thug. This was a soldier, and the elite kind at that. The landline phone rang. The shrill bell cut through the heavy atmosphere. Blake picked up the receiver. "Sheriff Blake," he said, "I heard your deputy just walked back." A female voice came through on the other end. Cold, elegant, and authoritative. "Elsa Gray." "It was just a minor accident," Blake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Don't underestimate my intelligence," Elsa said. "I am on the hill. I see everything through my binoculars." That giant neutralized Hatcher in less than 2 seconds. "He is heading towards the diner. He is going back to meet that girl Charlie. I will handle him." "How? Send a few more fat guys over for him to exercise." With Elsa's laughter rang out sharp as a shard of glass. "You are facing an alpha wolf, Philip. House dogs cannot bite him." "What do you want?" Blake asked, glancing at Hatcher, who was huddled in the chair. "Call Meredith," Elsa ordered. "The project has reached the field testing stage. We need data." "That giant. He may have the perfect physique. Meredith will like him," Blake shuddered. Even though he was an accomplice, the name Meredith always stirred a sense of disgust mixed with fear within him. "Meredith cannot control that bunch," Blake said. "Letting them loose in town is too risky." "We are not letting them loose in town. We are herding the prey into the woods. Isolate him, cut off his way back, turn him into a sacrifice." "How do we lure him? He is the type of hero, isn't he?" Elsa's voice became smooth, calculating. "He likes to protect the weak, so give him a weak one to protect. Capture that girl, Charlie. Bring her into the Black Forest. He will follow. I guarantee it." The line went dead. A long, endless beat. Blake set the receiver down. He looked out the window. Reacher was out there somewhere, a giant shadow moving through the fog, heading towards him. Blake opened the bottom drawer. He pulled out a bulky black satellite phone. No mobile signal, no eavesdropping, directly connected to the research station in the woods. He dialed the number. Meredith, Blake said, when the other end picked up. "Prepare the cage. We have a specimen type A." Blake hung up the phone. He turned to Hatcher. "Go take a shower," Blake ordered. "Then come back here. Bring the rifle. We are going hunting." Hatcher looked up. In his eyes, the fear of Reacher was momentarily replaced by another fear, more familiar, yet even more terrifying. The fear of what was living in the woods behind the factory. Are we going to use them?" Hatcher stammered. "No," Blake said, lightly patting the grip of the pistol at his hip. "We're just guiding the way. They will do the rest." Outside, the wind began to howl stronger. A storm was forming offshore, but the real storm had already made landfall. 12:48. Reacher pushed open the door of the Anchor. There was no sound of a wind chime. The cluster of shells and glass bells had been ripped down, scattered across the floor like broken teeth. Inside was silent. The smell of old beef fat had been overwhelmed by a stronger odor. The smell of panic. The acrid sweat seeping from overactive adrenal glands. Reacher paused at the threshold. He scanned the room with his eyes. 3 tables were overturned. A sugar jar lay shattered, its white crystalline grains crunching under his shoes. A streak of black coffee extended from the cash register to the back door, beginning to dry and stick. Charlie Cross was not there. Reacher stepped inside. He did not draw his gun. The Glock 17 remained still, behind his waistband, loaded but not yet needed. He moved into this deadly space with the calmness of an insurance inspector assessing property damage. There was a sound behind the bar, a small whimper tightly compressed in a chest. Reacher walked around the bar. A man was curled up under the sink. He wore an apron stained with grease and tomato sauce. A chef, a big bald guy, his skin pale like flour that had been overproofed. The chef looked up as Reacher's shadow loomed over him. He screamed. A short sound choked in his throat. He curled up his hands, clutching his head, pressing himself against the rusted drain pipe. He was trying to make himself as small as possible, attempting to vanish into the wall. "Don't," the man whimpered. "Please, I can't see anything, I swear." Reacher looked down. He did nothing. He just stood there. A mass of 196 centimeters blocking the only source of light. His presence in this cramped space created a physical pressure on the lungs of the man opposite him. The chef was not afraid of death. He was afraid of Reacher. He looked into his eyes and saw destruction. Not the hot brutality of Blake's thugs, but the absolute coldness of a crushing machine. "Get up," Reacher said. The chef tried to comply. His legs trembled, slipping on the slick tile floor. He had to grip the edge of the sink to steady himself. He did not dare look directly at Reacher's face. He stared at the frayed canvas jacket where a knife or a heart of stone could be hidden. "Where did they take her?" Reacher asked. "The woods," the chef stammered. Saliva dripped from his lips, but he did not dare raise his hand to wipe it away. "The Black Forest, behind the factory." "How many of them?" "4, not police. They wore black gas masks. They didn't say anything. They just pounced." "Did she resist?" "Yes. She threw a coffee pot at the lead guy, but he felt nothing. He injected her with a needle. She collapsed immediately." Reacher nodded. "Ketamine, or a stronger derivative of military-grade anesthetics, effective within 3 seconds." "What about you?" Reacher asked. The chef shivered. Cold sweat streamed down his temples. "They cannot see me. I am in the cold storage. I looked through the crack in the door. The commander's name. He left this." The man trembles, pointing at the bar counter. A small metal box lies amidst the chaos. Cubic in shape, each side measuring 10 centimeters. The surface is rough painted in matte black. There are no labels, no locks. Reacher picks up the box. Light, about 200 grams. He opens the lid. Inside it is lined with shock-absorbing foam. Nestled within the foam is a seed. It is the size of a golf ball, with a rough dark purple shell streaked with red veins like blood vessels. It emits a faint scent. The smell of bitter almonds mixed with the earthy dampness after rain. Reacher squints. He recognizes it, not from botany textbooks, but from a military intelligence summary 17 years ago. Ricinus communis, genetically modified. Castor bean plant. But not the wild type. This is an artificially bred strain designed to thrive in low-light environments, rich in heavy metal toxins. Its seeds contain ricin at 50 times the natural concentration, and the seed's shell is oozing a black resin. Reacher closes the box. Click. The dry sound halts his train of thought. This is not a drug. This is a biological weapon. A low-cost deterrent. Easy to produce, hard to trace. Meredith Blake is not insane. He is a misguided defense contractor or a dealer of death to the highest bidder, and they need hosts to test the toxicity. Giles has survived. Amos Cross is dead. Now it is Charlie Cross's turn. Reacher slips the box into his jacket pocket. His stomach growls, a biological reminder that cannot be ignored. His body is a large internal combustion engine. It needs fuel. He walks around the chef, who is standing frozen. He opens the refrigerator, takes out 3 eggs, 2 thick slices of bacon, and a piece of cheddar cheese. Reacher turns on the gas stove. The blue flame flares up. He cracks the eggs into the cast iron pan, the sizzling sound shattering the deadly silence. The chef stares at him in shock. He does not understand. He has just witnessed a kidnapping. He is standing before a dangerous giant, and that giant is cooking. Reacher's calmness terrifies the chef even more than when he drew his gun. It shows absolute control, an arrogant confidence that nothing can touch him, not even time or enemies. "Bread," Reacher says, without turning around. The chef jumps. He hurriedly pulls a loaf of bread from the lower shelf, his hands trembling as he places it on the counter beside the stove. Reacher toasts the bread over the open flame. The aroma of burnt grains mingles with the scent of fried eggs. He sandwiches everything between 2 slices of bread. He eats standing up, 3 large bites. 1,000 calories are ingested into his system within 2 minutes. Reacher drains the glass of water from the tap. He wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. "Stay here," Reacher tells the chef. "Lock the door. If Blake comes, tell him I have received the invitation." "Where are you going?" the chef asks, his voice barely audible. He looks at Reacher as if he is staring at a dead man. The Black Forest. No one returns from there. Reacher steps out the door. He pauses, adjusting his coat collar to shield against the cold wind blowing in. "I do not intend to return," Reacher says. "I intend to go through it." He stepped outside. The fog had completely lifted. The sky turned a heavy leaden gray. Dark clouds swirled above the treetops behind the canning factory. Reacher looked toward the northwest. Blake wanted to drive him into the woods. He wanted to play a cat-and-mouse game on his home turf. He thought the dense forest traps and Meredith's monsters would be an advantage. He was wrong. Reacher was not a mouse. He was not a cat either. In the dense forest, he was a natural disaster. He began to walk at a speed of 4 miles per hour, steady, tireless, heading straight toward the black chimneys, belching poison into the sky. The hunt began. 1 hour and 15 minutes in the afternoon. The canning factory appeared around the bend. A massive grim gray concrete block lay flattened under the leaden sky. A 30-meter-high chimney rose up, emitting pale yellow fumes. Reacher stopped. He stood behind a dead oak tree 200 meters from the main gate. He observed. No signs. No trucks coming or going. A 3-meter-high iron gate wrapped in razor wire. A concrete guard booth placed right at the entrance. The booth's tinted glass was bulletproof, one-way glass. 2 men stood outside the guard booth. They were not locals. They wore black cargo pants, tactical jackets, and high-top boots. Heckler and Coke MP, 5 submachine guns hung in front of their chests on 3-point slings. Their stance was relaxed, yet alert. Their eyes scanned continuously in a 180-degree sweep. Mercenaries. Former military or private contractors, Reacher calculated. A distance of 200 meters, no large cover to approach directly. The MP5 had an effective range of 200 meters, a firing rate of 800 rounds per minute. He backed into the shadows. He moved around to the west. The wind blew in from the sea. He walked against the wind to mask his body odor and sounds. He moved parallel to the fence surrounding the factory. The terrain changed. The ground beneath him became soft and black. The grass disappeared. Instead, there were low bushes, dark purple leaves, and gnarled trunks oozing sticky resin. The black forest, the faint scent of bitter almonds lingered in the air. At a low concentration, not enough to be immediately lethal, but enough to irritate the mucous membranes of the nose. Reacher pulled up his collar to cover his mouth. The western fence was cut. A rectangular hole, big enough for a person to pass through. Fresh shoe prints imprinted on the muddy ground. Size 9 shoes. Vibram soles. The same type as the soldiers at the gate. They had brought Charlie this way. Reacher stepped through the hole. Inside the forest, the light was dim. The thick canopy obscured the sun. The trunks grew close together, twisted like deformed vertebrae. No bird sounds, no insect noises, absolute silence. Reacher ventured 50 meters deeper into the forest. He stopped. There was the sound of a dry branch breaking. Very faint, the crack of rotting wood being compressed. At 3 o'clock, 15 meters away, Reacher slid himself behind a large tree trunk. He stood still. His heart rate maintained at 50 beats per minute. He became one with the rough black bark. A soldier stepped out from the bushes. He was dressed entirely in black. A gas mask covered his face, revealing only 2 reflective eye sockets. In his hand was an AR-15 assault rifle equipped with a suppressor. He was patrolling. His steps were cautious. He stopped sweeping the rifle's barrel across the area where Reacher was standing. Reacher did not breathe. The soldier turned his head away. He continued walking. He passed by Reacher's position, a distance of 2 meters. Reacher stepped out. The soldier heard the noise. He turned around sharply. He saw Reacher. Through the mask's glass, the soldier's pupils dilated to their maximum. He did not scream. He did not have time to raise his weapon. His body betrayed him. The central nervous system overloaded with visual data about the mass and height of the object in front of him. He was paralyzed. A pure biological reaction to a threat beyond his processing capacity. Reacher swung his right hand. The edge of his hand, as hard as steel, struck the soldier's neck just below the edge of the mask. Thud. A dull sound. The windpipe crushed. The soldier dropped his weapon. Both hands went up to clutch his neck. He collapsed to the ground. His legs flailed wildly in the pile of decaying leaves. The wheezing from his throat sounded like a deflating tire. Reacher bent down. He picked up the AR-15. He checked the magazine. Full. The safety was off. He looked at the soldier writhing in agony at his feet. His eyes bulged behind the glass. He looked at Reacher with sheer terror. He had been trained to confront humans. He had not been trained to confront a natural phenomenon. Reacher waited until the soldier stopped moving entirely. He dragged his body into the bushes. He searched the pockets of the tactical vest. A radio, a Kabar knife, a key card. Reacher took the knife and the key card. He left the radio behind. He did not want to hear Blake's orders. He continued on. The forest opened up to a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a dilapidated metal-roofed shed, but surrounding the shed were modern equipment, an industrial generator, an air filtration system, high-intensity floodlights. 4 soldiers stood guard around the shed, and in the center of the yard, tied to a metal chair, was Charlie Cross. She had her head bowed to her chest. Her hair was matted. Her shirt was torn at the shoulder. An IV line was inserted into her left arm, connected to a bag containing a pale yellow solution hanging on a high rack. Reacher squinted. Next to Charlie was a man in a white lab coat, Meredith Blake. Meredith was not wearing a mask. He had his back to Reacher. He was adjusting the valve of the IV bag. He turned around. Meredith's face was a map of pain. The scar, uneven and jagged, stretched from his forehead down to his chin, pulling one eye and lip askew, revealing yellowed teeth. He smiled. "Come on," Meredith said to Charlie, his voice rasping like sandpaper on wood. "Just a little more. You will see what your father saw." Charlie did not respond. She was unconscious. A soldier approached Meredith. He whispered something. Meredith nodded. He looked at his wristwatch. "Start the process," Meredith ordered. He turned the valve. The yellow solution began to drip faster. Reacher raised the AR-15. He had no time to plan. He had no time to calculate an escape route. A distance of 50 meters, the wind blowing sideways, wind speed of 5 meters per second. Reacher aimed at the head of the soldier closest to Charlie. He inhaled, exhaled halfway, held his breath. His index finger tightened on the trigger. Pop. The suppressed sound of the shot was like a soft cough. The soldier fell backward. A neat bullet hole appeared in his forehead. Blood and brains splattered onto Meredith's white lab coat. Meredith screamed. He did not see where the shot had come from. He only saw his subordinate collapse like a puppet with its strings cut. He panicked. He slipped and fell to the ground, crawling backward toward Charlie's chair. The remaining 3 soldiers reacted immediately. They raised their guns, sweeping their barrels toward the edge of the forest. "Enemy 1" shouted. Reacher did not hide. He stepped out from behind the trees. He stood tall, gun at the ready. The nearest soldier saw him. He froze. For a tenth of a second his brain refused to process the image of a giant with a rifle walking toward him as calmly as if strolling in a park. He had expected a special forces team or police. He did not expect a lone man. That hesitation killed him. Reacher fired a second shot. The bullet pierced the soldier's throat. He dropped his weapon, clutching his neck, blood spraying through his fingers in dark red jets. The other 2 opened fire. Bullets tore up the ground around Reacher's feet. The sharp explosions shattered the silence of the forest. Reacher did not run. He moved in a narrow zigzag. 1 step to the left, 2 steps to the right. He advanced. He was a massive moving target, but impossible to catch. He fired a third shot. Hit the shoulder of the soldier on the right. He felt the gun flying away. The last soldier, the commander, hid behind the generator. He poked his gun out and fired wildly. He was terrified. He screamed into the radio, calling for backup. His screams were high-pitched and off-key. Reacher walked towards the generator. He did not shoot back. He waited. The commander's gun was out of bullets. The sound of the hammer striking the empty chamber echoed with a click. Reacher circled around the generator. The commander looked up. He was changing the magazine. His hands trembled so much that he dropped the new magazine to the ground. He saw Reacher standing ominously above. He saw the dark muzzle of the AR-15. He dropped his gun. He raised both hands. "Don't," he pleaded. "I'm just a hired hand." Reacher looked at him coldly. "Wrong profession," Reacher said. He struck the butt of the gun against the commander's temple. The commander collapsed unconscious. Reacher stepped over his body. He moved towards Charlie. Meredith Blake was huddled under the chair. He held a scalpel in his hand, pointed at Reacher. His hand shook violently. "Who are you?" Meredith shrieked. "What are you?" Reacher did not answer. He kicked the scalpel out of Meredith's hand. He grabbed the pharmacist by the collar, lifting him off the ground with one hand. Meredith's legs dangled in the air. Reacher looked into his scarred face. "I am the side effect," Reacher said. He threw Meredith into a pile of empty barrels. Reacher turned to Charlie. He closed the IV valve. He yanked the syringe out of her hand. Her pulse was weak. Her skin was cold. Her breathing shallow. Reacher looked at the clock in his head. 1 hour and 25 minutes. He picked Charlie up. One hand held the gun. He turned back to see Meredith groaning in the trash. "Run," Reacher said. Meredith looked bewildered. "Run and call your brother," Reacher continued. "Tell him I'm coming." Reacher turned his back, carrying Charlie into the woods. The hunt was not over yet. It had only shifted to a more brutal phase. Reacher carried Charlie. She weighed about 55 kilograms. To him, this weight was negligible. It was just a sack of sand evenly distributed across his left arm. His right hand still held the AR-15. He moved eastward, not towards the town, towards the sea. The forest grew denser. Clusters of purple-leaved bushes interspersed with dead tree trunks formed a natural wall. Reacher no longer tried to remain silent. He snapped branches, crushed underbrush. He created a straight path through the woods, like a rhinoceros barreling through every obstacle. He knew what Meredith Blake would do. He would call Philip Blake, and Philip Blake would call Hatcher. A small army would descend into this forest within 15 minutes. Reacher mentally checked the time. 1 hour and 35 minutes. He stopped at a shallow stream. The water here was dark and foul-smelling. Dead fish floated belly up, stuck in the roots of the trees along the bank. Charlie squirmed. She moaned. The anesthetic was wearing off. Reacher laid her down on a flat, dry rock. He gently patted her cheek. "Wake up," he said. Charlie opened her eyes. Her pupils dilated painfully under the dim light of the forest. She looked at Reacher, then around her. Panic set in immediately. She was about to scream. Reacher covered her mouth with his hand. His hand was large, covering half her face. "Quiet," he said. "You are safe, for now." Charlie nodded. Reacher removed his hand. "What happened?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "They captured you. They intended to use you as a guinea pig. I stopped them," Reacher said briefly. He handed her a bottle of water he had taken from the chef's refrigerator. "Drink, to flush out the anesthetic." Charlie took a big gulp. Water spilled from the corners of her mouth. She coughed and spluttered. "Where are we?" "The Black Forest," Reacher replied. He stood up, surveying the surroundings. "About a mile from the coast. The terrain slopes down. We will head to the sea." "The sea?" Charlie shook her head. "The cliffs are steep. No way down. Unless we go through the old bunker." Reacher finished her thought. "Observation post, where your father died." Charlie shuddered. "Why go there? It's a dead end." "Not a dead end," Reacher said. "It's a strategic position. 1/2 meter thick reinforced concrete. One single entrance. A clear view of the sea. And most importantly," he pulled a metal box from his jacket pocket. "I have this." Charlie stared at the purple seed in the box. She recognized it. She had seen it in her father's scribbled drawing 16 years ago. "What is it?" Reacher said. "In its pure form. Meredith Blake cultivated it. One seed is enough to kill a regiment if aerosolized properly." The sound of a helicopter echoed from afar. Reacher looked up. The distinctive thumping of the rotor blades, an uneven rhythm, a single turbine engine. "Bell 206, Jet Ranger," Reacher said. "Civilian helicopter. Low flying range. They are using it to search for heat." "We have to hide," Charlie said, trying to stand up, but her legs were weak. "You can't hide from thermal sensors in sparse woods," Reacher said. He helped her up. "We have to move." To the coast. The moisture and sea breeze will disrupt the heat signal. They began to run. Reacher helped Charlie. He urged her to move faster than her body allowed. They slid down muddy slopes, weaving through sharp thorns. The sound of the helicopter grew louder. The wind from the rotor began to shake the treetops above them. Faster, Reacher commanded. They burst out of the forest's edge. In front of them was an open stretch of rocky land extending to the edge of the cliff. The sea wind blew strongly, carrying the sharp scent of salt water. And there, towering on the highest rock outcrop, was the bunker. Type 4 observation post. A gray, grim concrete block defying time and the elements. The helicopter appeared from behind the tree line. It hovered in midair, its nose pointed down. A man sat in the side door holding a sniper rifle. Reacher pushed Charlie down behind a large rock. Bang! The bullet plowed into the ground right where they had just stood. Debris flew up in a spray. Reacher raised the AR-15, 300 meters away. The target was moving. Strong crosswind. He did not shoot at the sniper. The target was too small. He aimed at the tail rotor of the helicopter. The Bell 206 has a mechanical weakness. The tail rotor drive shaft is partially exposed at the joint behind the aircraft's body. A precise 5.56 millimeter bullet could jam the joint or destroy the dynamic balance. Reacher calculated the wind drift. He compensated 2 degrees to the left. He fired a 3-round burst. Click, click, click. The first shot missed. The second hit the aircraft's body. The third struck the tail rotor shaft. A deafening metallic grinding sound echoed. The tail rotor slowed down, then stopped completely. The helicopter lost directional control. It began to spin in place. The pilot tried to counteract the torque of the main rotor, but it was useless. The aircraft lurched, losing altitude, plunging into the sea like a broken-winged bird. Boom! A white water column shot up 10 meters high. The helicopter sank for a few seconds, leaving only oil slicks and debris floating on the surface. Reacher lowered his weapon. Charlie looked at him, mouth agape. She had just witnessed a man use a rifle to shoot down a helicopter, not in a movie, but right before her eyes. With 3 bullets, let's go, Reacher said. The bunker. They ran to the bunker door. The heavy steel door was tightly shut. The outside latch was rusted, stuck fast. Reacher handed the gun to Charlie. Take this, he said. Watch the forest edge. He grasped the latch with both hands. He tensed his body. The muscles on his back and shoulders rolled beneath his jacket. He concentrated all the strength of 115 pounds into a single point, ket. The sound of rust creaked and screamed. The latch moved a millimeter at a time. Catch! It popped open. Reacher pushed the door. It swung heavily on its dry, unoiled hinges. The musty smell and cold air rushed out from inside. They stepped in. Reacher closed the door behind them. He secured the latch inside with a loose iron bar picked up from the floor. Inside the bunker was pitch dark. Only light filtered through the narrow slits facing the sea. Reacher flicked open the Zippo lighter. The flame flared up, illuminating the 20-square-meter concrete room. The floor was covered in dust. A rotting wooden table lay in the corner of the room, and on that table was a skeleton. The skeleton sat in a chair, its head drooping down onto the table. It wore a tattered outfit, but the shape of a blue engineer's jacket was still recognizable. Charlie let out a choked sob. She recognized the gold ring on the bony finger of the skeleton. "Dad," she whispered. She rushed over, kneeling beside the table, grasping that bony hand. Reacher shone the light onto the wall next to the skeleton. There were scratch marks, scratches made by human nails, in utter despair. And a line of text was etched deep into the concrete with a sharp object, perhaps a nail or a key. The inscription read, "Meredith and Philip, Project Nightshade." Reacher looked at the inscription, Nightshade, Deadly Nightshade, a poetic name for a deadly project. He looked out through the slits. Outside, police pickup trucks were parked at the edge of the woods. The headlights illuminated a wide area. Dozens of figures were moving towards the bunker. Philip Blake had arrived, and he brought the whole town with him. Reacher extinguished the lighter. "Charlie," he said in the darkness, "we are surrounded." Charlie looked up. She wiped her tears. In the darkness her voice rang out sharp with the anger of 16 years of repression. "Kill them all," she said. Reacher smiled, a cold smile that only the darkness could see. "That's the plan," he replied. He stepped to the slits, resting the AR-15 on the concrete ledge. He checked the magazine. 20 rounds left. He wouldn't need more than that. 1 hour and 50 minutes. Reacher pushed Charlie towards the corner of the room, a dead end, where 2 concrete walls met to form a safe triangle. No bullet from the firing slit could reach there. "Sit down," Reacher said. "Cover your ears, open your mouth," Charlie complied. She had stopped asking questions. She understood that her survival depended entirely on obeying the orders of this giant. Reacher turned back to the firing slit. Outside, Philip Blake was standing behind an armored Ford F-150. He held a loudspeaker. Surrounding him were 12 deputy sheriffs armed with Remington 700 rifles and Mossberg 500 shotguns. A force sufficient to flatten a small village. "Reacher," the loudspeaker blared, distorted by the sea breeze. "You're out of options. That bunker is a rat trap. You've walked right into it." Reacher did not respond. He observed. He called it a rat trap. He was wrong. This was Coastal Battery Type 4. It was designed to withstand 150mm naval artillery. The rifles of the police were like mosquito bites against stainless steel. But Blake was not foolish. He knew he could not shoot through the walls. He would use a different tactic. Reacher saw 2 deputy sheriffs carrying a large compressed gas cylinder from the back of the truck. The cylinder was gray. It had a high-pressure valve, a long nozzle, gas, or tear gas. They would pump gas through the firing slit. In the confined space of 20 square meters, the gas concentration would reach saturation within 30 seconds. Reacher looked around the room. No gas masks. No ventilation system. He glanced at the AR-15. 20 rounds. He looked at the rotting wooden table. He looked at the remains of Amos Cross, and he saw a hole in the floor partially obscured by a broken chair leg. Reacher stepped forward. He used his foot to push the chair aside. A cast-iron manhole cover, 60 centimeters in diameter. The surface was engraved with the words, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This was not just an observation post. This was a fire control station. It must have a tunnel leading down to an ammunition depot or a backup power station deep underground. Reacher knelt down. He hooked his finger into the gap of the manhole cover. Heavy, solid cast iron. Rusted tight. Reacher took a deep breath. He engaged his thigh and back muscles. He pulled. Ket. The manhole cover shifted. A cold, musty air mixed with a strong scent of seawater wafted up from below. Charlie, Reacher called, "Come down here!" Outside, the hissing of compressed gas began to sound. A thick white smoke started to seep through the firing slit, spreading throughout the room. CS gas. Reacher pushed the manhole cover aside. He helped Charlie climb down the rusty iron ladder below. "Don't let go," he instructed. "Just keep climbing down until you reach the ground." Charlie disappeared into the darkness. Reacher turned back. He held the AR-15. He fired a shot at the air tank outside. Bang! The bullet pierced through the gap in the wall, hitting the pressure valve of the tank. Hiss! SS! The tank exploded. Gas spewed back towards the group of police officers. Coughing and swearing erupted chaotically. The deputy officers fled in panic, rubbing their eyes. Reacher threw the gun down the manhole. He climbed down after it. He pulled the manhole cover back into place. Darkness enveloped them. They were in a vaulted concrete tunnel, 2 meters high, 1.5 meters wide. Water dripped from the ceiling of the tunnel. Reacher flicked open his Zippo lighter. The tunnel sloped downward, heading towards the sea. "Where are we going, Charlie?" asked her voice, echoing in the narrow space. "Out to sea," Reacher said. "This is an emergency escape route. It leads to a discharge outlet below the tide level." They walked about 100 meters. The tunnel ended at a large iron grate. The sea was lapping on the other side of the grate. The tide was rising. The water level was up to their chests. Reacher shook the grate hard, sturdy, unyielding. He looked at the lock, a padlock the size of a fist, completely rusted. Reacher turned off the lighter. He needed both hands. "Step back," he said to Charlie. He drew Hatcher's Glock 17, which he had tucked behind his back. The author corrected the detail. Reacher had thrown Hatcher's gun into the sea at beat 6. Here, he only had the AR-15 taken from the mercenaries. Reacher held the AR-15. He used the butt of the gun to strike the lock hard. Thud, thud, thud. After the 5th strike, the lock shattered. Rust had made the metal brittle. Reacher pushed the grate. It opened. The seawater rushed in, icy cold. "Swim," Reacher said. They dashed into the sea. Big waves. Reacher held onto Charlie's hand, tightly pulling her to swim away from the jagged rocks. They swam around the outcrop, heading towards a small sandy beach hidden from the lookout. They reached the shore, soaked, shivering cold. Reacher wrung the water out of his coat. He checked the AR-15. Salty water. It needed to be cleaned if he wanted to shoot again. But it wasn't necessary right now. He looked up at the cliff. Blake and the group of police were still surrounding the bunker, waiting for the tear gas to take effect. They did not know the prey had escaped. "What now?" Charlie asked, her teeth chattering. "Now we counterattack," Reacher said. He looked towards the town. Blake had brought his entire force out here. The police headquarters was empty, and more importantly, Blake's mansion was unguarded. The place where records were kept, the place where evidence was stored, the place where dirty money was hidden. "Do you know where Blake's house is?" "Yes, the mansion on the hill, next to the church." "Lead the way," Reacher said. "We are going to pay him a visit, and we will leave a message." They walked along the coastline, using the large rocks for cover. Reacher felt a cold thrill rising within him. Blake thought he was the hunter. He was wrong. He was just the bait holder. And Reacher was coming to take it all back. 2 hours and 15 minutes. Reacher and Charlie walked south along the shoreline. The wind had died down, but the sky remained gray. The waves crashed against the rocky shore with the steady rhythm of a giant heart. They approached the town from behind. Not through the main road. They navigated through narrow alleys filled with trash, and the smell of rotten fish nestled between abandoned warehouses. Reacher stopped in front of an old hardware store. Hardware and marine supply. The door was locked. A sign reading, "Closed," hung askew on the glass. "What do we need here?" Charlie asked. She was still shivering from the cold, her arms wrapped around her chest. "Shopping," Reacher replied. He looked around. No one was there. He gently tapped the corner of the window with the butt of his AR-15. A triangular piece of glass fell out. He reached in and unlocked the door. They stepped inside. The smell of machine oil, pine wood, and cleaning chemicals filled the air. Reacher walked along the shelves. He was not in a hurry. He moved with the precision of someone following a shopping list memorized in his mind. He picked up a 4-liter can of acetone, a bottle of concentrated hydrochloric acid used for cleaning hulls, a roll of thin steel wire, a box of D-cell batteries, 2 cheap alarm clocks, and a 50-kilogram bag of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. Charlie watched him pile the items on the counter. "What are you planning to do with all this?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Basic chemistry," Reacher said. He grabbed an orange plastic bucket. He poured in the fertilizer. He mixed in the acetone. He crushed the batteries to extract the graphite cores. ANFO, Reacher explained, his hand still working swiftly. "Ammonium nitrate fuel oil, industrial explosive. But I added acid and acetone to increase sensitivity. It won't be as stable as military-grade C4, but its explosive power is equivalent to 80% TNT." Charlie took a step back. She looked at the plastic bucket, emitting a noxious chemical vapor. "Are you planning to blow up the whole town?" "No, just one house." Reacher took the 2 alarm clocks. He connected the wires from the alarm clock speakers to a homemade detonator made from a broken light bulb and gunpowder extracted from 3 AR-15 cartridges. He set the time. 30 minutes, Reacher said. He packed everything into a canvas duffel bag he found in the corner of the store. He left 2 $100 bills on the counter. "Let's go." They left the store. Reacher carried the bag in his left hand. the AR 15 inches, his right hand, hidden beneath the hem of his coat. Philip Blake's mansion sat atop a hill overlooking the entire town. An old Victorian house painted white with a wide porch and large columns. It exuded an air of authority and long-standing wealth. The iron gate swung wide open. There were no guards. Blake had thrown all his resources to the coast. He was too confident in the trap at the bunker. Reacher and Charlie walked into the yard. The white gravel crunched beneath their feet. The front door was locked. Reacher kicked at the lock. The thick oak door, 5 centimeters thick, swung open, slamming against the wall. Inside was quiet. Luxurious furnishings, polished wooden floors, a crystal chandelier. "Find his office," Reacher ordered. They split up. Reacher went to the ground floor. Charlie headed to the second floor. Reacher found the office at the end of the hallway, a spacious room with mahogany-paneled walls. A large desk was placed in the center of the room. On the wall hung the heads of animals, deer, stag, and even a black bear head. Reacher placed the bag containing the bomb on the desk. He began to search. The drawer was locked. He used a Kabar knife to pry it open. Inside were stacks of files, accounting books, planning maps, and a black leather-bound diary. Reacher opened it. The pages contained meticulous notes about shipments, dates and times, quantities, ship names, and a list of recipients. Project Nightshade. Not just biological weapons, it was a global smuggling network. Meredith produced, Blake transported, and Elsa Gray laundered money. Reacher Charlie's voice called from upstairs. Her tone was laced with fear. Reacher ran up the stairs. 2 steps at a time. Charlie was standing in front of the door to a bedroom at the end of the hallway. The door was open. Inside, on the large bed covered with red silk sheets, was a woman, Elsa Gray. She wore a black evening gown, elaborate makeup. She sat propped against the bed's headboard, a glass of red wine in her hand, but she did not move. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. A trickle of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth, and embedded in her chest was a silver-handled dagger. Reacher stepped inside. He checked her pulse at her neck. Nothing. Her skin was cold. She had been dead for at least an hour. "Who did this?" Charlie asked, her hand covering her mouth to stifle a gag. Reacher looked at the dagger. The handle was engraved with the Blake family crest. Philip Reacher said, "He is cleaning up. He knows this has blown up. He killed Elsa to cover the financial trail, and he's trying to kill us to eliminate the witness trail." Reacher looked at the clock in his head. 2 hours and 45 minutes. The bomb downstairs has 15 minutes left. "We have to go," Reacher said. "Right now." He pulled Charlie out of the room. They ran down the stairs. Just as they reached the front door, a burst of gunfire shattered the wooden frame right above their heads. Bang, bang, bang. Reacher pushed Charlie down to the floor. Outside, Philip Blake was standing in the yard. He held an M4 automatic rifle. Beside him were Hatcher and the other 10 deputy sheriffs. They had returned. Reacher Blake shouted. His face was red, twisted with rage. "You think I'm stupid enough to leave the house open for you? I have cameras, you bastard." Reacher looked at the clock. 10 minutes. He looked at the AR 15 inches his hands. 15 bullets, 12 enemies, overwhelming firepower, no way out. He looked at Charlie. She was curled up on the floor, her face pale. "Listen," Reacher said, his voice calm amidst the whizzing bullets outside. "There is a gift in the bag on the desk. It will explode in 10 minutes. We need to buy time until then." "How do we buy time? We're trapped." "Not trapped," Reacher said. He pointed to the ceiling. "To the roof. There is an old oak tree behind the house. Its branches reach close to the eaves. What about you, Reacher?" Loaded around into the chamber. "I will go out and have a talk with the sheriff." He stood up. He kicked the shattered door open. Reacher stepped out onto the porch. He did not shoot. He stood there towering like a bronze statue. The police stopped firing. They were stunned by his audacity. "Blake," Reacher called. His voice echoed across the yard. "Your common-law wife didn't die very beautifully." Blake let out a growl like an animal. He raised his gun. Reacher raised his left hand. He held a black leather diary. "I have your client list, Blake. Hezbollah, the Sinaloa cartel, the North Korean army." "You're playing a big game." Blake lowered his gun slightly. Greed and fear struggled in his eyes. That notebook was his life. It was his insurance policy. "Give it to me," Blake said, "and I will let you die quickly." "You want it?" Reacher asked. "Come and take it." He threw the notebook back inside the house. Blake signaled, "Hatcher, go get the notebook. The rest of you provide cover." Hatcher and two others rushed up the steps. Reacher stepped back into the house. He fired 3 shots. Bang, bang, bang. One man fell down. Hatcher and the remaining guy rushed through the door, firing wildly. Reacher ran up the stairs. He shot back to hold them off. 5 minutes. He ran into Elsa's bedroom. Charlie had climbed out the window. Reacher climbed after him. He grabbed onto the gutter, swinging over to a branch of the oak tree. The branch bent under his weight. Reacher let go, falling onto the grass behind the house. He rolled to dissipate the impact. Charlie was waiting there. "Run!" Reacher shouted. They dashed into the woods behind the mansion. Inside the house, Hatcher had found the notebook on the desk. He smiled triumphantly. He picked up the notebook, and he saw the ticking suitcase beside it. He noticed 2 alarm clocks. The second hand pointed to 12. The circuit was closed. The detonator was activated. Boom! A massive fireball tore through the ground floor of the mansion. Windows shattered. The roof was blown into the sky. A thick column of black smoke billowed up, carrying debris, glass, and human remains. The shockwave knocked Reacher and Charlie to the ground, even though they had run 50 meters away. Reacher lay face down, shielding Charlie. Debris fell around them like rain. When the explosion ceased, silence returned. Heavier than before, Reacher got up. He brushed the dust off his shirt. The luxurious Victorian house was now just a pile of burning rubble. Reacher checked the time in his head. "Exactly 3 o'clock. Cleanup is done," Reacher said, but he knew it wasn't over. Blake was still outside when the explosion happened. He could be injured, but he wasn't dead. And a wounded beast is the most dangerous beast. 3 o'clock and 2 minutes in the afternoon. Dust from the bricks and plaster began to settle. A layer of white powder covered the surrounding coniferous bushes, turning the scene into a fake winter painting amidst the damp cold of the coastal region. Reacher brushed the dust off his shoulders. He stood up from a prone position. Charlie Cross remained still. She was gasping for breath. Her hands clutched her head tightly, her eyes squeezed shut. The ANFO explosion created a shockwave traveling at a speed of approximately 5,000 meters per second. Even at a distance of 50 meters, the pressure was enough to rupture eardrums and cause temporary vestibular disturbance. "Get up," Reacher said. His voice was low, cutting through the ringing in her ears that tormented her. Charlie opened her eyes. She looked towards the house. There was no house anymore. The ground floor had vanished. The second floor had collapsed, crushing everything beneath it. Flames began licking at the broken wooden beams. She turned to look at Reacher. He stood there calmly, checking the safety of the AR-15. He had just obliterated a 100-year-old historic mansion and killed at least 3 people, including Hatcher. But there was no glee on his face, nor any remorse. Only the focus of an engineer assessing the effectiveness of a demolition process. The fear in Charlie's eyes changed shape. She was no longer afraid of Blake. She was afraid of the man standing next to her. "Hatcher," she gasped. "Hatcher made a tactical mistake," Reacher said. He let greed overshadow his vigilance. He looked towards the front yard. Thick black smoke billowed up, forming a natural curtain. "You head north," Reacher pointed deep into the forest. "There's an old substation 2 miles away. Wait for me there." "Where are you going?" "I have 9 targets left." Reacher did not wait for an answer. He turned his back and stepped into the smoke. He moved against the wind. The smoke obscured the enemy's vision, but the wind carried sounds to his ears. Coughing and choking. Swearing. Groans of pain. Philip Blake had survived. He was shouting orders on the other side of the rubble. Reacher moved in a wide arc. He did not attack head-on. He approached from the right flank, where the thickets were densest. A deputy sheriff staggered out from the smoke. He was injured. Blood flowed from a long cut on his forehead. He held a Mossberg 500 shotgun, but the barrel was pointed downwards. He was disoriented. Reacher stepped out from behind an oak tree. The deputy sheriff saw him. He flinched, trying to raise his weapon. Reacher did not run. He stepped forward, a long 2-meter stride. His left hand grasped the shotgun barrel, pushing it aside. His right hand clenched into a hammer-like fist, struck directly at the deputy's supraclavicular muscle. Not the face, not the stomach. The supraclavicular muscle is where the vagus nerve is concentrated. A strong blow to this point would cause anaphylactic shock, leading to a sudden drop in blood pressure and disconnecting signals from the brain to the body. The deputy sheriff collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. He was not dead. He was just powered down. Reacher picked up the Mossberg. He checked it. 5 12-gauge shells in the chamber. He slung it over his shoulder. 8 targets left. Blake's voice rang out closer. Split up. Find him. He can't have gone far. Shoot the hell out of him as soon as you see him. Reacher hid behind a crumbling brick wall. He calculated. Blake was in a panic. He was using standard search tactics, forming a line and advancing forward. But he forgot one thing. This was not an open field. This was a dense forest combined with a blast site. Visibility was limited to under 5 meters. Reacher picked up a stone the size of his fist. He threw it to the left, 20 meters away from his position. The stone landed in a pile of shattered glass. Crash. 3 rifles immediately fired in the direction of the noise. Bang, bang, bang. Remington. 308 Winchester bullets pierced through the bushes, embedding themselves harmlessly into a tree trunk. Reacher pinpointed the location of the gunfire sparks. 3 men on the left, 2 in the middle next to Blake, 3 others on the right flank. He moved to the right. 2 deputy sheriffs were approaching. They were close together. A mistake. In jungle combat, the minimum safe distance between 2 soldiers is 10 meters to avoid being taken out by the same burst of fire or grenade. They saw Reacher's shadow glide by. "He's over there," one of them shouted. Reacher stopped. He was no longer hiding. He stood upright, fully exposed between 2 charred tree trunks. The 2 policemen froze. They saw him. In the gray smoke, Reacher appeared larger than usual. His tattered canvas jacket was covered in white dust and dried blood. His face was expressionless, smeared with soot. He held the AR-15 with one hand, the barrel casually pointed toward the ground. That calmness paralyzed their reflex to pull the trigger. Instinct told them that the creature before them was not afraid of gunfire, and shooting him would only make him angrier. Reacher raised his weapon. No need to aim through the mechanical sights. At a distance of 15 meters, for someone who had fired millions of rounds in the military, aiming became a natural muscle reflex. Click, click, 2 brief explosions. The man on the left was hit in the right shoulder. The force of the 5.56 millimeter bullet spun him around. He fell screaming in pain. The man on the right was shot in the thigh. The femoral artery was severed. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. He collapsed, clutching his leg with both hands. Reacher did not fire again. The wounded would make noise. Noise would confuse the remaining ones. And more importantly, the injured needed medical assistance that would reduce Blake's fighting force. Reacher continued to move. He circled behind Blake's formation. Blake was standing next to the rubble of a porch. He held an M4. He was firing wildly into the forest every time he heard rustling leaves. "Come out, you son of a bitch!" Blake yelled. He had completely lost control. Reacher observed Blake's M4. It was the short-barreled 14.5-inch carbine version. The theoretical firing rate was 900 rounds per minute. Blake was set to full auto mode. Reacher counted. Blake had fired 3 long bursts. Each burst contained about 10 rounds. The standard magazine held 30 rounds. Blake was out of ammunition. He pulled the trigger again. Click! The slide remained in the open position. Reacher stepped out of the smoke. He stood 10 meters away from Blake. The remaining deputy sheriffs aimed their guns at him, but no one fired. They saw their comrades lying scattered on the ground. They saw the house that had been flattened. And they saw the man who had caused all of this without a single new scratch on him. Reacher's presence at that moment was akin to an inevitable disaster, like a tsunami or an earthquake. You do not shoot at a tsunami. You run away. "Drop your weapon," Reacher said. Not loudly, just loud enough to be heard. A young deputy sheriff, trembling, dropped the Remington to the ground. The sound of the gun hitting the gravel rang out like a signal of surrender. One by one, they laid down their arms. They stepped back. They did not want to die for a $3,000 salary in a dying town. Only Philip Blake remained. He looked around at the soldiers abandoning him. He drew the zinc-plated Desert Eagle pistol from the holster at his hip, a flashy, heavy gun with high recoil and lack of accuracy. The kind of gun for those who prefer to show off power rather than effectiveness. "I will kill you," Blake hissed. Reacher looked at the Desert Eagle. A 50 AE caliber, great stopping power. But the barrel was shaking to the chaotic rhythm of Blake's heartbeat. "You have 6 rounds," Reacher said. "I am standing 10 meters away from you. I can reach you in 0.5 seconds. The time for your brain to command your index finger to pull the trigger is 0.2 seconds. The mechanical time for the hammer to strike is 0.05 seconds. A total of 0.25 seconds for the first shot." Reacher dropped the AR-15 to the ground. He stepped forward. "You will miss the first shot because the recoil will cause your wrist to jerk up 30 degrees. You will take 0.5 seconds to adjust your aim. By then, I will be right in front of you." Blake heard those numbers. They were cold, precise, and ruthless. They choked his hope. He raised the gun. He closed his eyes and pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet whizzed past Reacher's left ear, embedding itself in the tree behind. Blake's wrist jerked back up over his head just as predicted. Reacher charged forward. He did not run. He launched himself. A mass of kinetic energy weighing 115 pounds collided with Blake. The sound of breaking ribs echoed sharply. Both fell into the pile of rubble. Reacher lay on top. He knocked the gun away. He grabbed Blake by the collar, lifted his head, and slammed it hard against the shattered concrete. Blake went limp. Blood flowed from his nose and ears. Reacher stood up. He looked down at the man who had ruled Dead Rock for the past 16 years. Now he was just a pile of bruised flesh, lying on the ruins of himself. Reacher turned to the group of police officers standing frozen in place. "Call the FBI," Reacher said, "and call an ambulance, in that order." He picked up the empty duffel bag. He brushed the dust off his pants. It began to rain. The cold raindrops fell onto the fire, creating sizzling sounds and columns of white smoke. Reacher looked at the clock in his mind. 3:15. It was time to find Charlie and end this. 4:30 in the afternoon. Reacher walked into the cannery area. This time he was not sneaky. He walked through the main gate. No more guards. No more masked mercenaries. They had received word of the explosion at the Blake mansion. They had realized that this contract was not worth their lives. They had retreated. Only Meredith Blake remained. The mad pharmacist had nowhere to go. The lab in the woods was his home, his sanctuary, his coffin. Reacher stepped into the workshop. The smell of dead fish mingled with the pungent odor of chemicals. In the middle of the workshop, Meredith stood next to a large stainless steel tank. He held a plastic canister. He was pouring some liquid into the tank. He laughed, the sound echoing in the cold metal space. "You've arrived," Meredith said, not turning around. "I knew you would come. You are the variable X. You are the catalyst." Reacher stopped 10 meters away from him. "What are you doing?" Reacher asked. "Cleaning up," Meredith replied. He turned around. In his hand was a gold-plated Zippo lighter. "I will burn this place down. All the evidence, all the data, and you too." "What's in the tank?" "Liquid ammonia." Meredith grinned, revealing his yellowed teeth. "And bleach. When I ignite it, it will create chlorine gas, enough to kill every living creature within a 2-mile radius. Dead Rock will truly become Dead Rock." Reacher looked at the lighter. The tiny flame danced in the madman's hand. "You will die with it," Reacher said. "I died 16 years ago," Meredith whispered, his eyes wide and wild. "Since I saw the potential of Nightshade. Since I sold my soul to the devil for power." He raised the lighter high. "Goodbye, Reacher." Reacher did not rush forward. He did not have enough time. He raised the rifle. Not an AR-15. He had left it in the woods because it was out of ammunition. In his hand now was the Desert Eagle, 50 AE he had taken from Philip Blake. An oversized gun, too heavy, terrible recoil. But at this distance, its impact was absolute. Reacher aimed at the lighter. Meredith let go of the lighter. It fell. Reacher pulled the trigger. Boom! The explosion sounded like thunder in the enclosed workshop. The 50 caliber bullet flew away at a speed of 470 meters per second. It struck the lighter when it was still 1 meter away from the mouth of the tank. The lighter shattered into pieces. Metal fragments and sparks flew everywhere. Meredith screamed. The bullet did not hit him, but the pressure of the air as the bullet passed by ruptured his eardrum. He fell backward, hitting his head against the edge of the tank. Reacher stepped forward. Meredith crawled up. He pulled a scalpel from his lab coat pocket. He lunged at Reacher, a final, desperate attempt. Reacher did not dodge. He raised his left hand, catching Meredith's wrist that held the knife. He tightened his grip. Crack! The wrist bone shattered. The knife fell to the concrete floor with a clang. Reacher grabbed the collar of Meredith's shirt. He lifted him up. He looked into the crazed eyes of the pharmacist. "You like chemicals," Reacher said. "You enjoy watching things dissolve." He threw Meredith into the tank of liquid ammonia. Meredith fell in. He did not die immediately. Liquid ammonia at room temperature would cause extreme frostbite and suffocation. He struggled. He screamed, but his screams were quickly drowned out by the bubbling white foam. Reacher turned and walked away. He did not stay to see the outcome. He knew the chemical result of that process. He exited the factory. Outside, the rain had stopped. The fog began to lift. Weak rays of afternoon sunlight pierced through the clouds, shining down on the town of Dead Rock. Reacher walked towards the old transformer station. Charlie Cross was waiting there. She sat on a concrete block, hugging her knees, looking out to sea. She saw him approaching. She stood up. "Meredith," she asked. "Has been neutralized," Reacher replied. "What about Philip? Broken ribs. Traumatic brain injury. The FBI will find him when they arrive here within the next hour. The data in the journal is enough to put him away for life." Charlie nodded. She looked at Reacher. In her eyes, there was no longer fear, only gratitude and a hint of profound sadness. "You saved my life," she said, "and you liberated this town." "I was just passing through," Reacher said. "And I don't like being disturbed while drinking coffee," Charlie smiled. A genuine smile, the first since he met her. "Where are you going, south?" Reacher pointed down the highway. "Or north? It depends on which ride arrives first." "Aren't you staying to receive everyone's thanks from the FBI?" "I am allergic to bureaucracy," Reacher said. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the metal box containing the nightshade seeds. "This," he said, handing it to Charlie. "The final piece of evidence. Give it to the agent in charge of the case. Tell them Meredith cultivated it." Charlie took the box. She held it tightly in her hand. "Thank you, Jack." Reacher nodded. He turned away. He began walking down the highway. He walked. A long stride of 1 meter. Steady. He did not look back. He is Jack Reacher. He has no home. He has no destination. He only has the road. And the road always stretches out before him. 4:45 in the afternoon. Reacher stood at the intersection, where the cracked asphalt of Dead Rock met Highway 101 running along the coast. The rain had completely stopped. The pavement was steaming, creating a thin layer of mist just above the ground. In the distance to the south, the sound of sirens blared. Not one vehicle, a convoy. The deep, muffled sound resonated with the cliffs, creating a chaotic symphony. Reacher listened. He distinguished the V8 engines of the Chevrolet Tahoes. High-pressure jet engines. Run-flat tires grinding on the wet pavement. FBI. Hostage rescue team. Or at least, the state police with heavy equipment. They were 4 hours late, following the standard bureaucratic procedure. Charlie Cross stood beside him. She still held the metal box. She looked towards the approaching convoy, then turned to look at Reacher. In her eyes, Reacher was no longer a man. He was an extreme weather phenomenon, a storm that had swept through her town, uprooting poisonous trees, flattening dilapidated structures, and now dissipating, leaving a clear sky behind. She wanted to say something, a word of thanks, an invitation to stay, but she swallowed it all. She understood that keeping Reacher around was as futile as trying to hold the wind in her palm. "They will want to take your statement," Charlie said. "They have you," Reacher replied. "You are the witness. You are the victim, and you have evidence. I am just an unknown variable in their equation. They will look for you. They will not find me. I have no address. I have no phone number. I do not exist in the tax system." A silver Greyhound bus appeared from the north. It slowed down its right turn signal, blinking. Reacher looked at the vehicle. Model MCID 4500. Detroit Diesel Series 60 engine, 6 inline cylinders, 450 horsepower. An old but reliable workhorse. It is running the Seattle-San Francisco route. The bus came to a stop. The pneumatic door opened with a long hiss. The driver was a large black man wearing a baseball cap. He looked at Reacher, then at Charlie. He did not ask. He had been driving this route for 20 years. He had seen all kinds of people at the desolate rest stops. Reacher turned to Charlie. "Sell the house," he said. "Get out of here. Dead Rock is dead. Don't bury yourself with it." Charlie nodded. She stepped forward, standing on her toes. She intended to kiss his cheek, but she stopped. An invisible wall separated them. The wall was built of violence and loneliness. She realized that this man did not belong to the world of gentle touches or family dinners. She stepped back. "Goodbye, Jack." Reacher gave a slight nod, a minimalist gesture. He stepped onto the bus. He pulled out his wallet, 2 crumpled $20 bills. He handed them to the driver. "Go as far as you can," Reacher said. The driver tore the ticket. Reacher walked down the aisle between the 2 rows of seats. He had to lower his head to avoid hitting the luggage rack. The bus was nearly empty. Only an old woman dozing in the front row and 2 young men with headphones in the middle. Reacher chose the last row, the right corner. The seat was cramped. The distance between the 2 rows of seats was 76 centimeters. His legs were 1 meter and 1 centimeter long. He had to sit sideways, stretching his legs into the aisle. The bus shuddered. The diesel engine roared. The wheels began to roll. Reacher looked through the dusty window. Charlie Cross was still standing at the intersection. She was getting smaller. Behind her, the red and blue lights of the police convoy began to color the evening sky. She would be fine. She had the genes of Amos Cross, the genes of resilience. The bus accelerated, merging into the main lane, a speed of 60 miles per hour. Dead Rock receded behind. The canning factory, the crumbling mansion, the concrete bunkers, the poison forest, all vanished around the bend obscured by cliffs and pine trees. Reacher leaned his head back against the seat. He closed his eyes. He checked his physical condition. A bruise on his right shoulder from the impact of the M4 stock. A scratch on his left wrist. A heartbeat of 60 beats per minute, a bit hungry. He touched his jacket pocket. The toothbrush was still there. The ATM card was still there. Balance had been restored. The bad guys were dead. The good people had lived, and he was on the move again. The wheels ground against the asphalt, creating a steady, hypnotic sound. Whoosh, whoosh. Tomorrow he will wake up in another place, another town, another name. Perhaps he will find a diner that serves better coffee. Perhaps not. But that does not matter. What matters is the road, and Reacher is on it.